This is a 1975 Marshall lead, and it is just about ready to go home. Before I say anything else about the amp, they are repaving and resurfacing the street outside my house, so we may have some unusual background noises today. Believe me, it's worse on my end. This thing was delayed quite a bit because I had to get a replacement for the old fragile impedance selector switch. And I found one from TAD in Germany, and I'll show you more about that. But I ordered it. DHL lost it. It took weeks to confirm the DHL lost it. Ordered another one. There's a problem with the order. I don't know what the problem was. Anyway, that one burnt down, fell over, sank into the swamp. But the third one actually arrived, and that's what we have here. So I've got a chicken head on here. Right now it's at 8 ohms, 16.4, and I'll get up my label maker in a little bit and put something here. And it has a master volume. We'll show you that. Both of them have chicken heads. The chicken head is nice for the impedance selector because you can see where it's pointing. It'll point to the numbers. And I liked using a chicken head or other kind of knob other than the Marshall front panel knob for the master volume because it is on the rear. And this way you can reach around the back and feel where it is and know, because with the front panel knob, the regular one, there's no indication from the rear. So this is very useful to the player. And the original speaker jack that I removed to put this in here will be returned with the amp. It can be put back in place very easily with 2 bits of bus wire. But this way we have a master volume without drilling. I did consider drilling into the unused selector switch location here, but we just chose to use the standard existing 3/8" hole. And he's only going to be using this with 1 cab at a time anyway. And if you had an emergency where you had to use more than 1 cab, there are ways to do a parallel connection outside the amp itself. Inside, the amp is almost completely original. I changed out these electrolytics in the bias supply and on this first cathode. And I did lift the 2 180K, it says 220K on the board, but 180K resistors going to the, for the grid leaks on the output section. I replaced those with the dual gang master volume pot. I've got those original pyres that can be returned with the amp. This can all be put back. No damage was done in the process. But this is the bias connection going to pin 1 on each side of the dual gang pot. It's coming from here, and it's all twisted with the original green and orange wires beneath the board going to the pot. And I continued the green and orange connections to the grids. I'll show that in a bit. The amp came in with this non-original volume pot here. All the other pots are original. You can see I removed the bus wire that was going across the back of all the pots, and those grounds were made now just to distinct individual pots. This is not quite as good as my preferred method, which is to drill new ground lug connections to the chassis, but this was a non-invasive, non-permanent way to put this to a good ground scheme without ground loops. One other big change I'll show you in a little bit, but this can all be put back and there are no holes drilled in the chassis, and this gives the same effect. In this area, you can see the added grid stoppers. 4.7K, I was out of 5.6K. This amp didn't have them originally at all, and it is nice to have them for some RF protection right here. 4.7K is going to be exactly the same as a 5.6, and since it's adding a non-original part, I didn't have to chase the original values. I've got some 5.6Ks somewhere, but I didn't have 1 or 2 watt, which is chosen here for mechanical support as a mechanical strength, not in terms of the wattage. You can see I've added some 100 ohm resistors here from each side of the heater to ground. And there's a black wire tied in here that goes over here. And that is now the filter for the screen and phase inverter filter nodes. That is the ground for those nodes. It usually goes to here. This black wire is the HT center tap, which is one of the noisiest grounds in the entire amp. It is still going here by itself. And over here you have the ground for the reservoir cap, which is the other noisy ground. So the noisy grounds are over here standing in a corner by themselves. And instead of going from here to here, I'm bringing this over here to the output tube ground. You can also bring it to a point over in this area. On a super lead with a much more complicated set of filtering, there are different things I do, but this was a very easy, as I said, non-permanent, non-invasive way to give a better sound. Now, this was the old heater center tap wire that was physically connected here, but I have separated it, and I've put in these 100 ohm resistors, which is a better solution. And I'm going to tape this off, and I'll do it on camera here so you guys can see. So I've got it bent back on itself. And I'll slide some heat shrink over that so that I've got the bend back right here and I've got slack on either side. And then I'm going to heat that up. And when that's fully cool, you can't pull this off because it's compressed behind that bend. And this cannot contact anything you don't want it to contact, cannot short anything, cannot make contact with anything. But if you want to take it apart and put it back to how it was in 1975, just snip that off and reconnect that there and remove those resistors. But this is a much better way to do it. And here's a better look at the master volume. So this blue wire, again, is the bias connection. And then the yellow, I keep saying yellow, orange and green are twisted together beneath the board. Those are the original wires that went to the grids. And I've replicated the same color. This is 22 gauge, going to the added grid stoppers up in the air and making sure that it cannot contact here at the HT fuse. And once the chassis is in place, this will be like this once it's back in the cab. I've added, this is a 250K per side with a 2.2 meg across it, which puts the value just about 220K. The original had 180K, doesn't really matter. But if something were to go wrong with this pot and there was no connection from the bias to the wiper, it would still have a connection through this resistor. The bias would be off, but the tubes would have a bias reference and they would not self-annihilate and you would not have any damage. And here you can see on V1A, V2A, and V3A, these green grid wires are all coming from this side and going diagonally across the tube, or at least looped in that direction, and avoiding the black heater wires going to pin 9, as I showed in the noise Kill the Buzz video yesterday. Once upon a time, someone was making a Marshall lead amp. But to complete the amp, they needed two 500 picofarad or 470 picofarad capacitors, but they didn't have any, and they didn't know what to do. But then the amp fairy came down and said, if you have two 1000 picofarad caps and you put them in series, you will magically have 500 picofarad. And that's what they did, and they lived happily ever after. And that's why this amp still has two 1000 picofarad caps in series in each of these locations that would normally have 500 picofarad. They're kind of cool, they're funky, they work, they sound fine, they're staying. Thanks, Amp Fairy. And the old Lemco 5 nanofarad bright cap here is still in the amp, but it's disconnected at this end because it is a painful thing. I'll talk to the owner and see if that was his deliberate choice. All right, let's hear this thing. I've got a 335. Take it out of standby. Nice low noise level. This is for the master on 10. We may get a little bit of interference because I don't have a shielding in place. I'll show that in a little bit. Let's take off the tuner. All right, so we're going to go into the volume 1, the treble channel first. A little bit of bleed there. That's just the pot. It doesn't matter. And remember, that's with the bright cap out. If I connect the bright cap, so yeah, that's a lot. I'm gonna turn the master down a little bit though. That's really nice, but I think I could use a little bit more low end. And before I go to the tone stack, all that's at noon now. Let me just jump her over, get a little bit of the normal channel added in, the volume 2, the bassier channel. So now if I blend in a little bit of that, there's that fundamental. You have to be listening on real speakers or headphones to hear that. Now I can bring in a bit more of the treble on the tone stack just to get the right balance. That's a really nice sound, and without any of the buzz that the heaters were giving us, any of the buzz and hum that the ground loops were giving us. This is the goal, and this is like, edge of breakup. With the Strat, it would still be clean. With the humbuckers, it's not very clean. Let me tell you one of the reasons why. This 75 has a very low B+. The B+, the voltage present at the plate of the output tubes, in this case the 6550s, is 330 volts DC. 330 volts DC with the amp biased at about 62% dissipation, which is a great place for this particular amp. But this period of Marshalls had, especially on the 50 watters like this, had very low voltage in comparison to earlier and later Marshalls, which had upwards of 500 volts. 450 is more typical. 420 to 450 is the typical range. You can get as high as 550 on some of the big boys, as low as, in this case, 330. But that lower voltage does give you earlier breakup and compression. The amp just doesn't have the headroom. And some people love that and some people hate that. I like it, but it's not the only Marshall sound I like. I know that Dave Friedman likes the higher plate stuff, and he's not wrong for that. You definitely get more punch and immediacy for rhythm stuff. This is a little bit spongy. Sorry, I turned to make sure my mic pre wasn't clipping, which it's not, but I was at the magic angle, playing at, this much gain with the hollow body guitar. You cannot face the speakers unless you want to. You might remember from a few videos ago where I was talking about how the post-phase inverter master volume keeps the preamp gain and keeps the distortion from the phase inverter section, whereas the pre-phase inverter master volume, as you turn the master volume down, the output section cleans up, and so you lose gain. That was on the Black Star, which had the pre-phase inverter master volume. Now, there are amps, such as Friedman's and Sure's, and a bunch of amps that have so much preamp gain that you can do a pre-phase inverter master volume and keep plenty of overdrive. But in a Plexi style, the JMP, this 75 Mark II lead, it doesn't have a lot of preamp gain. A lot of what you hear as distortion is also coming from the phase inverter. So with this post-phase inverter master volume, at very low levels, you still are getting some nice drive. Of course, you have to get about 10 o'clock and up before it becomes really nice. So it's about 10 o'clock there. Remember what I said about feeling where the knob is with the chicken head being nice? That's an example. Let's switch over to a Tele. Gotta get some single coil buzz. It's worth it. That's about as much high volume stuff as I can subject myself to in this room. Master volume is a nice thing. But before I call this amp done, let's do one more big test. Nothing in the inputs. Master volume on 10. And we're going to dime everything and see if we get any squeal. That's the tubes. That's normal. It's unavoidable. I mean, if you were to play right now, the neighbors would call the cops. And that noise level we're getting right now is this when you play. Thanks for watching.